Hello, I'm Sasan Kasravi with Proteus Debate Academy. Um, this video is a little bit different for a couple reasons. One, it's night. That's the time where I felt like doing this, got around to doing this. It's like midnight almost. And by request, this video is going to be a debate analysis video. I think it's probably public forum. But now we are going to be flowing. And by flowing, I mean I'm going to be flowing. And I'm going to show you what we do. I am not going to forget to introduce myself this time. What's the... I don't advertise this. Nobody sees this that doesn't already... My name is Sasan Kasravi. I am a debate coach in Northern California for Diablo Valley College. I also do some coaching for middle school and elementary age programs. Right now it's just one program, which is going great. And myself and my good friend and now fellow coach at Diablo Valley College, Paul Villa, run this channel, and the idea is to use the resources we have and the knowledge we have to try to bring a little bit more equity into the debate space so that the debate scene isn't just dominated by teams that have a lot of resources and coaches with experience and all that, which is fine. Like, I'm not complaining about that, but I think it's even better for them to have good competition. So just makes the activity better. Great. So let's talk about flowing. I have like the sniffles a little bit. So there's that. I might sniffle. I might play with my pen a little bit, like put it against my mouth. And in a debate, there is the flow and there is my flow. The difference between the flow and my flow, both have merits for showing you. So the flow is the record of the debate. It's the objective, correct flow of the debate. And that is interesting to see and probably useful, and I'll probably try to give some analysis of what is happening in the debate in terms of the flow. But there's also my flow, which is how I flow. And sometimes there's things that I don't put in. Sometimes there's shorthand that only I understand. Most times there's like little remarks. I talk shit on my flow, just like make little jokes about whatever they're saying, which I think is representative of what your judges' flows are actually going to look like. In a lot of cases, maybe I'm just projecting here. But I think the reason you don't see things like this often is because most people are insecure about showing their flows, right? Nobody wants to be seen as not being capable of making a good decision or have their decision challenged for whatever reason. And so people don't tend to, like, if you ask a judge after a round if you can see their flow, like, they're probably not going to. You're lucky if your coach shows it to you. But I don't care what you people don't know me. I don't know you. So it's fine. I'm going to try to balance it, though, so that I can do a little bit of both, as I mentioned, right? Both give a depiction of the round in the objective, the flow sense, but also show you how I flow. Let's talk a little bit about how I flow. I flow, first of all, on legal size paper. Some of you do, some of you don't. I don't think this is that unheard of. But what's different than what a lot of you do is I flow on many sheets of paper. This is actually extremely common in the Parley Policy College LD world. I see that most high schoolers will flow on 2 pieces of paper, which I think is insane. And you guys will flow like super duper small. I don't flow. Actually, that's funny. I was going to say I don't use like a particular pen. Like I don't have a Pilot G2. This is a Pilot G2. I steal so many pens from my students. I don't think I've bought a pen ever. So I just happened to pick one up. I don't know. I don't really care about the kind of pen. Like, I would just as quickly, in fact, I might prefer to use this Uniball pen. I don't see why it makes a difference. Honestly, like, you don't need to write that much when you flow, and I don't write that much when I flow. But anyway, why do I use many sheets of paper? I use many sheets of paper because I put each argument on its own sheet of paper. That way I can mix them around and go in any order I want without having to jump around the page and keep mental track of what I did hit, what I didn't hit. And that way when an argument is thrown out of the debate, which rarely happens in public forum because people don't collapse enough, I can literally just throw it out. So, or when a new argument is introduced, I just get a new sheet, right? So if somebody in the MG is running like MG theory, which I know is uncommon, right? But or if the AF is like, hey, let's go, or sorry, the neg goes like, on case, let's have 15 solvency answers. Like, instead of trying to cram that into a little bit of space, I'll just get a new sheet of paper. So that's why that is, and that's why that's common, and this is why I flow. There's a lot of videos on flowing because it's a pretty ubiquitous, is the word I'm going to choose, thing in debate across various formats. People do it in different ways. My college league, or like little regional league, is the Northern California Forensics Association. And on the YouTube channel for that, you'll see that every year we have like a camp where we teach certain things and we record the lectures. There's a great one on flowing in this year from Mr. Ryan Guy. There's a great one from last year by Hal Sanford. So there's lots and lots of videos on how to flow much better than you're about to see me do. And knowing that, I'm going to feel pretty secure in having a shitty flow. But let's look at this round. I don't know anything about it. I don't really even know who's in it. Let's make myself small here. Whoa. Well, is that how big I want? Where are these people in relation to the screen? They're above halfway. Okay, so this is PolyPrep FK versus Bronx OS, Harvard Finals 2019. I don't know what either of those schools or that tournament is, but sounds big, sounds prestigious. These kids look good, you know, nice and professional. One of them is kneeling on the ground, it looks like. I don't know. Okay.
Ben and I affirm contention 1 is sending a signal. According to Thrall GMU, the U.S. arms 167 countries, with 84% of U.S. weapons exports going to authoritarian regimes. Thrall furthers that the U.S. actively arms at least one side in 45 out of 50 ongoing civil wars. Currently, CRS explains that Congress has never successfully blocked arms sales to any of these countries, despite egregious human rights violations. According to Harvey of Exeter University, if the U.S. ended arms sales to Saudi Arabia, this trend would be disrupted, making countries feel that the U.S. will no longer give them a blank check, as future arms sales challenges seem much more probable. Thrall concludes that this powerful signal will deter countries from targeting civilians, as they would fear a loss of American support, reducing the human cost of conflict. This is critical as Lucas of Global Research concludes that 90% of victims in civil conflicts are civilians, with the U.S. arms causing the deaths of 20 million people worldwide since World War II. Contention 2 is partners in crime. In 2015, Saudi Arabia intervened in the Yemeni civil war, reducing much of Yemen to rubble through a campaign of sustained aerial bombardment. According to Rydell of Harvard University, this campaign relies on American military support, as U.S. has routinely resupplied the Saudi Air Force with bombs and spare parts to the tune of $23 million every month. In 2017 alone, the U.S. sold the Saudis 3,500 cluster bombs, all of which were dropped on Yemen within a matter of months. According to Hartung of the IIP, the U.S. supplies 82% of all Saudi weapons. Rydell explains that as the Saudi Air Force conducts combat operations in Yemen, they are constantly coming under enemy fire and require regular repairs. As such, the Saudis need an enduring supply of spare parts from the U.S. to keep their warplanes in action. Even undamaged warplanes need regular upkeep, which is why there are currently 6,000 American technicians working to maintain the Saudi Air Force. Being so dependent on the U.S. for these services, Rydell finds that without U.S. arms sales, the Saudi Air Force would be immediately grounded, and the kingdom would be unable to switch to another provider for decades. This is vital, as Hartung explains that Saudi Arabia has little regard for the laws of war, which has created the world's worst humanitarian crisis. Ending Saudi airstrikes would alleviate the suffering in two ways. First, through reducing civilian casualties. According to the PRI, Saudi airstrikes are responsible for 2/3 of all civilian deaths in the war, with one strike occurring every 90 minutes. Dozens of cities and towns have been bombed, leaving 17,000 civilians dead, with civilian casualties rising 164% in recent months. Second, through sparing critical infrastructure. According to Bachman of American University, Saudi airstrikes have targeted civilian infrastructure over 2,000 times, accounting for 2/3 of all infrastructure damage in the war. According to Monday of Tufts, food production is the most frequent target of bombings, as the coalition hopes to starve the Yemeni people into submission. Monday explains that by destroying crops, irrigation systems, and food stores, the Saudis have reduced the food supply by nearly 50%. Bachman reports that 50,000 Yemeni children have already died as a result of hunger, with over half the country currently on the brink of famine. More airstrikes could push them over the edge. As Kratz of New York Times reports that if bombings continue over the next year, malnutrition will spike by 50%. Third, by facilitating peace. According to Bosley of The Atlantic, so long as the U.S. enables Riyadh to control the skies and bomb with abandon, the Saudis are confident that total victory is inevitable, as they can take their time demolishing Yemen without sustaining many casualties. An end to arms sales, however, would force Saudi Arabia to abandon the war, as it could not continue airstrikes and doesn't have enough trained soldiers to stage a ground invasion. The only option left would be signing a truce. According to Feltman of Foreign Affairs, an end to Saudi airstrikes would also create trust among the Houthi rebels and increase their willingness to negotiate, improving the probability that a diplomatic solution is reached. This is why Feltman concludes that peace can only be negotiated once the Saudi bombing campaign ends. Thus, we affirm.
Okay. Yeah, let's go over it. Well, first let me show you my flow. I do know a little bit about this topic. I remember it. Let me make myself big so that you can actually see what I'm working with here. Okay. So, here's contention 1. It'll be easier to read if I don't have the other one behind it. Okay, sending a something. See, the name doesn't really matter, right? And then U.S. Uses countries. I'm trying to read it off the screen. Something Civil War. And here, like, it just kind of ends. Like, there's no, like, clear impact scenario. I mean, the argument just sort of... I don't know what this is for, right? I don't understand what the point of this argument is. Like, U.S. arms authoritarian countries, and if we stopped this instance, it would end the trend. But you can't fiat that we stop arming other places, right? It would be like if someone was like, well, what would happen if I don't eat dinner tomorrow? And I was like, well, you may never eat again. You've disrupted the trend. Then we go to contention 2, which is randomly like 6 times longer than contention 1. Partners in crime? I didn't really... Again, like, no one's ever gonna, like, challenge me on what the name was, right? But here we have, like, they sell weapons. And here's the thing. Halfway through this, I was like, who am I trying to impress? I'm writing way more than I would normally write. And I think it's partly just to seem like I have a good record of the debate, but a lot of this just doesn't matter, right? So, sold weapons used in Yemen, regular repairs required, 6,000 technicians. The number of technicians, I promise, is not going to be in contention. Like, there's not going to be, like, well, if it was 5,000 technicians, then this argument would work, but it's 6,000, so it doesn't. But, you know, then we go to, you know, without U.S. SA is grounded. SA is SA, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia does not abide by the rules of war. Something famine. Civilian deaths, that's Civ D. And then here I have numbers again that, like, aren't gonna... I mean, if they're doing a death-by-death impact, it'll matter, right? But the fact that it's a blank percent, like, increase, like, is 164% increase just is not gonna matter. but whatever, I wrote it. So these are the three like impacts, I guess. The second one is civilian infrastructure, more food stuff, and then the third one is facilitate peace, which no warrants of any kind really. Like I get it. Saudi Arabia is not gonna have planes if you don't give them planes, but the argument that this like forces them to sign a peace treaty shockingly didn't have a strong warrant behind it. But let's make myself small again and see how the opponents respond to that. Oh, no, sorry, it's cross-X. No, it's not even that. It's the other affirmative, then it's cross-X. Fucking public forum.
I just see
Why are people in public forum so bad at sharing evidence? Like, why does it always take you people 10 minutes to get a card over? Especially when a lot of times it's like, oh, I'm just going to hand you my laptop. Like, other people are, like, creating file chains, using speech drop, using flash drives. Just find it. Just have it ready. And this isn't a particularly bad instance of it, but there's some instances that I've seen in real life or in videos where it's just like, dude, it is taking you guys a really long time to just share evidence. But why does this child not have his laptop open yet? People want to go home, man. Like, if I'm a judge in this round, I'll get a trophy, right? Like,
Negate, resolve, the U.S. should end its arms sales to Saudi Arabia. Our sole contention is that ending arms sales will destabilize an already fragile situation in Yemen. The current ceasefire that has been established in Yemen has been the longest and most successful yet. Just a few days ago, British Foreign Minister Jeremy Hunt announced Yemen may finally be on the path to peace. This is the best chance we've had for a very long time. The recent talks in Stockholm have been a surprising success and could help build the trust necessary for a final peace deal. Such progress has only been possible because of U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia. Tom Rogan writes in the Washington Examiner in 2018, the only reason the Saudis are now moving towards a ceasefire is the Trump administration's pressure. Trump has earned Saudi Arabia's trust, and there are corresponding deference on the Yemeni civil war. Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman sees Yemen as a defining battleground in an existential fight against Iran, with Iran repeatedly firing ballistic missiles at Riyadh and helping assassinate erstwhile Saudi allies. It is ludicrous to think that the prince would cease his war effort absent the presence of major U.S. pressure and resolute U.S. support. Ending arms sales, which amounts to U.S. sanctions on Saudi Arabia, will destroy this balance and plunge Yemen back into the throes of chaos for two reasons. The first is that the Saudis would buy weapons that will kill even more civilians. Arms embargoes fail because the target country always finds other suppliers. For example, Oliver Sprague at the Control Arms Association finds in 2006 every one of the 13 UN arms embargoes imposed in the last decade has been systematically violated. If Saudi Arabia can't buy weapons from the US, they'll simply turn to other countries. Natasha Turak explains in CNBC in 2018, if the US moves towards some meaningful sanctions of Saudi Arabia, we will be joking to imagine that the Saudis wouldn't just sit down and accept it. Saudis will begin to tilt to Russia and China. Saudi Arabia has already made moves towards Russia in anticipation of less U.S. arms. Oliver Carroll writes in The Independent in 2017, agreement has already been reached on a deal to supply the Saudis with Russia's most advanced air defense missile system. The Saudis see how the balance of power is changing in the region, how the U.S. is pulling out, and how Russia is now increasing its influence in the Middle East. Not only will buying weapons from Russia and China enable the Saudi Arabia to continue the conflict, but it will result in more civilian deaths. Derek Chollet writes in Foreign Policy magazine in 2018, the Russians will step in and supply Saudi Arabia with less accurate weapons that will likely just kill more in Yemen. For evidence of that, consider Syria. In Syria, Bevan McNernan reports in The Independent in 2018, there's been a 34% increase in incidents of civilian harm caused by Russian airstrikes compared to 2017, with civilian casualties which can directly be linked to Russian aircrafts.
There you go.
The second is that the Saudis would become reckless and less constrained by the U.S. The U.S. alliance with Saudi Arabia is imperfect, but it is worlds better than not having any check on their actions. Hal Brands at Brookie at Bloomberg writes in 2018, it is not a coincidence that Saudi misdeeds have accumulated at a time when the U.S. is widely seen to be drawing down in the Middle East. The Saudi invasion of Yemen seems to have been motivated by perception that the Obama administration was no longer committed to containing Iran, so the kingdom would have to do that job itself. If it retreats from the Middle East, it will lose whatever restraining leverage it once had over its allies and competitors alike. It will leave behind not tranquility, but a more chaotic, rivalrous environment in which other nations feel forced to fend for themselves. U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia have prevented many civilian deaths. Tom Rogan writes in the Washington Examiner in 2018, although the Saudis are still too capricious with their use of force, American guidance has helped them target Houthi formations rather than entire city blocks with few Houthis somewhere inside those blocks. Motivated by their historic, cultural, and theological blood feud with Iran, the Saudis would care little about killing thousands more civilians if they believed it might win the war. America is the only check on them at this moment, and as demonstrated by the Saudi suspension of operations around the port of Hodeidah, that check has held. Thank you, and please negate.
Alright, two things. This argument is just like a list of claims and warrants one after another without any clear organization, right? Like, we hear the argument that the weapons are going to be more dangerous, or sorry, like less accurate, like 3 times before we hear the warrant for it. I don't really have any sense of when it's going to begin, when it's going to end, what it's trying to prove. It doesn't have like subsections, it doesn't flow any sort of natural order, right? It doesn't have like a clear uniqueness link, internal link, impact scenario, which it should. Like, this is a policy resolution. In other words, this is a disadvantage, right? So all of your things about why the status quo is good should come first. Then you talk about what exactly would be happening with the U.S. pulling out. This signals that they're not going to help them with Iran. This means that the blah, blah, blah is the whatever. This would mean that they turn to Russia. And then what the actual like consequences of that are, and then go into clear impacts, right? But here we're just sort of hitting everything randomly. It makes for a much messier flow, but also like it makes the argument less clear rhetorically. That said, I mean, I think it's a very generic affirmative against a very generic negative. What do I want to hear in cross-X? I want to hear in cross-X, how exactly is the United States keeping Saudi Arabia in check? Like, I would want, as the affirmative, to spin the story that, yeah, the only reason Saudi Arabia likes Trump is because they let them do whatever war crimes they want to do. That would probably help. I think what the negative needs to talk about is just start setting up for these blocks you're going to read against why, like, them losing their American support means they have no way of attacking anyone. Like, why wouldn't they just buy it from somewhere else? Which is the predictable clash, right? Like, anyone going into this topic, short of finals even, you know, long before the tournament, should see that these are the main arguments on each side, and you should, one, have cleverer cases that avoid these, but shy of that, at least have like strong evidence against it, and that's what I am looking to see. So let's see what happens in this cross-X. Whenever that.
Is that the first question? Yeah. So Saudi Arabia, according to you, can so quickly shift to Russia, or maybe it might be China in rebuttal, then why does the U.S. have any unique leverage over the kingdom?
Because the U.S. uniquely provides Saudi Arabia with a security guarantee.
What does that mean?
Why is it unique if they can get it from anyone?
Crisis where someone like Iran attacks them, the U.S. will have their back.
Won't the U.S. do that
with China or Russia?
Okay, won't the United States do that even if we stop selling them weapons? Like, we weren't like
No,
selling
no,
weapons to
no,
Kuwait in
you missed
1991
the-
when Iraq invaded.
child on left missed the answer of like, and Russia and China won't do that? Like, one of the fundamental cross-examination questions that you want to ask in pretty much any debate is, why hasn't this happened already? And what the AF needs to be asking the neg is, if the US is so replaceable, why hasn't Saudi Arabia already done this? And whatever reason the negative gives, you use that, because that is a barrier to the negative happening, right? So if they say, well, because China and Russia won't back them in other Middle East conflicts, then you use that as leverage for your argument that says that's why the U.S. has leverage, right? But you're sort of skipping right past that, right? You heard the answer. You're not thinking about how it helps your story. So now they're going into whatever else.
Still, like, took collective actions to prevent
Our
that
argument is about the perception of MBS. What our evidence indicates is that the foundation of the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia is based on arms for oil. So whether or not the U.S. would actually come to their aid, he would view the ending of arms sales as undermining the fundamentals of this relationship, and he would not be sure that they would
Okay,
come to
so
their
if
aid.
arms
Can I
sales,
ask you a
no,
question?
really quick, logic. So if arms sales are like the foundation of relationships that create security guarantees, and Russia then moves in and sells a lot of arms, won't Russia, by default, also like give Saudi Arabia security
No,
guarantees?
because Saudi Arabia does not trust Russia because they fund Iran. Can I ask you a question?
Wait, so then why are they going to buy all their weapons?
Because they,
No,
there's a difference
not why are they going to buy all their weapons. Then why would they not comply with what the United States is saying? Why would they turn to somebody else if you're saying they need America? Can they replace them or can they not?
between buying weapons, like the U.S. in the U.S.
You're going to buy like weapons from people you don't trust.
Yeah, they already doing that. They're buying weapons to Russia right now.
But they're buying like token weapons. Like they bought like one missile system.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. So your argument about sending a signal. When the U.S. suspended arms sales to China, to Thailand, to Egypt, to humanitarian, like
Wait, when did
anyone else after the Iran war, that's when they stopped it to China. Did any other regime like stop committing human rights violations?
Okay, well that was like different for a couple of reasons. So A, it was different because like the countries in that particular instance weren't committing the same human rights abuses. We stopped just because like we discontinued it. But secondly,
wait, China's not committing human rights violations.
Okay, can I give you my second reason here, really quick?
But just to respond to your first reason.
I know you don't like. Yeah, China's very bad. Okay. So, but what I would tell you to address it is we've never invoked the War Powers Act, signed in 1973, which have Congress actually take action or pass a law that says we can no longer sell to a particular country that abuses human rights. Because it sets a precedent. We've never done it before. We never cited human rights abuses as the reason.
No, the reason why we ended arms sales to China was because of human rights abuses. Yes.
Like, okay, we can go back and forth on that. Can I ask you a question?
We can go back and forth on that is probably the lamest response to any cross-ex disagreement. Yeah, no, that's a really bad contention. Why would us doing this mean that we stop future arguments? Because it sets a precedent? Yeah, but it's not happening out of a legal... It's not like the courts are stopping it, right? It's not like the United States courts should stop arms trades, and that sets a legal precedence for courts to stop it later. We just stop doing it. That would be a pretty good AF if you had a plain text and public forum would let you do that. So yeah, the courts strike it down, and that way you actually have a legal precedence that says that this will stop other instances from happening because now you've established the legal precedence. But you just can't. It's not even durable fiat, right? It's just other instances of other things. The resolution just straight up does not talk about other countries. So I don't think you can really leverage that in the debate. But I'll also I realize it didn't show my flow, but I will after the cross-ex is over.
That is true. Like, there's no unique reason why other countries would
it's
happened many times.
Like we're gonna go back and forth on this.
Yeah, go ahead.
Our evidence is specific to Saudi Arabia.
What does that mean?
So I want to ask you about Syria and about Russian weapons being a lot more inaccurate. So at the point where the U.S. has sold Saudi Arabia 3,500 cluster bombs, which have a radius of impact of a square mile, how can you get any less accurate than that?
We get more. I don't
Like 2 square miles?
Yeah, I mean, you know.
That's not even a bomb. That's like
No, because right now they're using it to target
Wave of
military
fire.
facilities. Now you use it to target civilians.
But 2/3 of
Okay, but targeting civilians is no longer about.
There'll be more.
You've just taken out one of your links. You had 2 links for why more civilians die. One is because the weapons themselves are less accurate. 2 is because they now don't have the check back that magically exists. They listen to the United States, apparently, to not kill civilians. You've just taken out the one that talks about the actual weapon. So now you have to just, I think there's better ways to answer that question that don't take out one of your links to pretty much your only offense. But is that the end of Cross X?
Okay.
Great, that's the end of Cross X. So let's real quick. I'm just gonna keep my. Cool. So what are we looking at? We're looking at counter contention 1, destabilization. The ceasefire is good. Yemen is on the path to peace. There's trust. U.S. relations with Saudi Arabia are key to that. Trump, something key. Saudi Arabia allies. Saudi Arabia and U.S. are allies against Iran. Saudi Arabia would put pressure on something. Can you even read this? It seems pretty fuzzy. Saudi Arabia buy weapons from blah 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 other places. Russia, China. Here's what my flow looks like. It's not really that interesting, but once the sort of line by line gets going, we'll see how it turns out. Also, you notice that I don't fold my flow. I just draw a line. It's fine. It's not a big deal. I don't have a very pretty flow, but I think it's functional. All right. Oh, this kid's gonna spread. Let's go.
We tell you that our case is fundamentally a prerequisite of theirs. As they say the Yemen war gets worse, we take away their capability to engage in the most destructive warfare. The war cannot get worse.
Okay, so he's extending the case that there's no answers to. So how am I supposed to? What am I supposed to do here? Like, I know, I already wrote down what you said, right? Like, I'm not gonna flow it as a drop. So this is an instance where trying to keep in mind how your judge is flowing might be helpful, because, like, what do you want me to do? You just, I know, you said it. You're just gonna say it again?
In their world, they're going to tell you other ways that they can buy weapons, but they're not going to tell you other ways that they can recommence airstrikes. That's really important. We tell you airstrikes are always going to be the largest impact around, and they're the only thing that allow you to penetrate beyond enemy lines and to do the type of.
So you're just splitting the constructive, and now you're gonna, like, read impacts on this?
Infrastructure damage we're talking about. Ground troops fight other ground troops. We tell you airstrikes allow you to literally, like, you can bomb, like, hospitals, food centers, food distribution, infrastructure, things that make long-lasting damage to the conflict. That's always going to be the largest impact. Then, go on to their first thing where they tell you about Russia and China potentially buying weapons. First of all, according to Hardship, in our case, it would take decades to switch to any other supplier. And remember, we tell you specifically that their airstrikes rely upon U.S. spare parts in order to constantly repair their planes, which are in active combat zones. But second of all, cavalry tells you that Russia does not have the right type of aircraft, and neither does China, to supply these types of weapons, so they're never going to be getting airstrikes back. But then Newton tells you that because they're propping up Iran and Assad, Russia will not sell them weapons. They give you one example. They're like, Russia sells them defensive weapons. But we tell you that they're selling them defensive weapons. They don't have the interest in selling them offensive weapons. That's because the diplomat evidence tells you that they want negotiations and stability, not escalation of the conflict. And we also tell you, according to New York Times, China has just 0.5% of the weapons, and they're also not the right type, and they wouldn't want to go against Trump, so they wouldn't do the sale. They try to paint this narrative that in their world the conflict gets better, and they give you the example of a ceasefire. We tell you that U.S. leverage in the ceasefire is not effective. According to RAND's National Security Council, the U.S. doesn't have the leverage over them because there's no credible threat that Trump will ever end arms sales. If there's not a credible threat that he'll do something, you don't have real leverage to do it. But then the Al Monitor evidence also says that Jim Mattis is the only member of the Trump administration actively pressuring for peace, and his replacement is not applying pressure on Saudi Arabia. That means U.S. pressure is not that existent in their world. But furthermore, we tell you that as long as you can win, they can't engage in that world. We tell you we restore legitimacy in negotiations,
negotiations, and the most likely way these negotiations will be broken is by Saudi airstrikes. But then even more so, according to The Guardian, we tell you the ceasefire has totally failed. There are 970 violations by the Houthis, and the Saudis and the UAE have pledged to use force to get the Houthis out of the city, and airstrikes have resumed. Which by Washington is telling us it's a stalling tactic that Houthis use to build up more troops and more trenches and ultimately fight even more. They also tell you, according to the IRIN, the violence has been so significant that no aid delivery being taking place. So the situation is only getting worse. And the ICG says it's just a ceasefire over one individual city, and they're using the guise of the ceasefire to attack coalition areas in the rest of the country more aggressively. Even if the ceasefire holds, they say those countries will still face famine, and the only way to stop that famine is to end the war and begin the process of rebuilding the country's food infrastructure. And even more so, we tell you we're always going to make peace more likely. One, because Biden tells you he makes the war seem unwinnable to them. As long as you can win, they can't get these other types of weapons, and that even if they could, it wouldn't be an easily winnable war. Biden tells you that as long as they do not think the war is winnable, they will not devote the resources to it because it will look really unpopular if they lose it. But also, McBurney tells you the Houthis only fight back harder when military pressure is applied to them, and they're even less likely to negotiate when military pressure is applied. And the Economist furthers that the Houthis gain legitimacy through Saudi airstrikes because these airstrikes let them scapegoat Saudi Arabia for all the damage going on, and so they're deeply unpopular in the areas they govern, and they only get their strength and legitimacy through Saudi airstrikes. And that goes away. The Economist says they seek the table because they know that they will be overthrown instantly. They also tell you the U.S. is applying leverage to reduce civilian casualties. Remember, across on my other spots, they're saying they don't have real leverage, and they do not have an accurate threat of removing arms sales. In fact, we have even been certifying Saudi Arabia's decreasing civilian casualties, even as civilian casualties increase. And the UN said they systematically ignore our no-strike list, and they continue to strike civilian targets. But second of all, Rand tells you that we undermine our human rights credibility when we are selling them weapons, because it looks like the U.S. will never actually step up for human rights, and that doesn't allow us to do that in other instances. We also tell you that as long as we can win, the war is on a path to de-escalation, then they can't really escalate civilian casualties in the way they say. They just say that They just say that there's always going to be a bad war. We say this war cannot get a lot worse. We're selling them cluster bombs. These cluster bombs can target a square radius of more than 1 square mile. That's really important because we tell you at the point that the war is bad, the only solvency is taking away the capability to engage in that war and casting an affirmative ballot.
This was a little bit of a mess. Let's go into it. Okay, so first of all, we already talked about... Sorry, I know you're hearing all these sounds of my phone getting... whatever. First of all, what am I supposed to flow on your case? Like, you're just reading your arguments again, right? I'm not going to write it twice. They haven't said anything. So, yeah. I know you believe they're true. I heard you the first time you said them. But now let's get on this off-case position that he's answering. The line by here is just a mess. The line by line here is just a mess. Okay, so let's take a look at this flow. So I'm gonna basically summarize this flow by saying that it has 3 main sections. Now, the argument I told you, a little bit of a mess, no clear order, but it has some logic to it. It has status quo is good / Houthi peace. It has then goes into this whole section on Saudi Arabia motives for peace. Then we get Saudi Arabia turn to Russia / China. That is worse. And yeah, for 2 reasons, right? We're gonna put part 1, part 2. If I had to basically explain the organization and logic of this argument, it would be this. It'd be, whoops, here we go. Yeah. This is so difficult. Saudi Arabia, status quo. No, status quo is good for peace. Here's Saudi Arabia's motives for peace. Here is how Russia is going to turn to blah, 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 blah. the order that we went in this speech was not top down, and that is what you want to do because I'm writing at the top of the sheet of paper, and I need to know, especially if I was trying to flow everything on like my tiny public forum handwriting, whatever. We started here, and then like moved here, maybe? I'm not sure. Definitely then went up here, maybe then went over here. I think we dropped this, or like we touched on it kind of. So let's look at my actual flow. You'll notice that everything has to go in a proper order, right? Everything has to go next to what it is responding to, but this does not reflect the order that things were read. Things started, I think the first thing I wrote is takes decades to switch. And I look at my flow, and going back in the video, you might look at my expression going like, where on the flow should I write this? So I'm like, all right, I guess it goes kind of near the bottom here, and Russia and China can't do airstrikes. Russia sells defensive weapons, blah, blah, blah. We get all the way to the bottom. A lot of this stuff gets dropped. So what gets dropped? That America is the only check against them, that basically Russia and China wouldn't check them, gets dropped. Now, it gets dropped because they want to argue that it's never going to come to that, but you probably don't want to drop arguments anyway because now there's less that your opponents need to do to beat you on this sheet of paper. Then we go up, right? We go to the ceasefire is not effective. You're going to say that what attacks are still happening. And then there was some like weird stuff I didn't know where to flow, right? Like they say that like we make peace more likely. Like where does that go? I wrote it in response to Yemen is on the path to peace because I guess it turns this, but are you turning the status quo? Like you're not answering the story of why they're going for peace. I just floated next to it because they both have the word peace in it, but hopefully that's where you wanted me to put it. And then there's 3 arguments here just floating in the middle because that's the blank space I had. I don't have any idea where these arguments go. They have nothing to do with this argument. The Houthis get legitimacy through airstrikes. That sounds like an argument that you should have read in one of your constructives. Like, how does that answer the argument that pulling out destabilizes the region? Like, if someone was like, yeah, like pulling out destabilizes the region, and you're like, oh, but they get legitimacy through airstrikes. Like, it's not a direct response to anything. I mean, I guess I can take like 3 steps and figure out like, oh, I guess you're saying that they would have no one to fight against if we leave, but like, what? What? Is the argument that if we stop Saudi Arabians from bombing the Houthi rebels, there would be no Houthi rebels? How then began the Houthi rebellion? Like, surely they weren't just bombing the whatever. We undermine our human rights credibility in the status quo. What is that responding to here? Like, you're just saying a bad thing about the status quo. It's not a response to the counter contention. This war cannot get worse. That's pretty good, I guess. But it sounds like you're just extending. It sounds like you're answering something you think they will say. I don't know. Oh, I guess that goes against less accurate weapons. But I didn't have space there at that point, right? Because I don't know. The other thing is, yeah, I think so this could be clearer. 1, go in the same order that the argument was read in. 2, tell me where you want me to write this, as in say what this is a response to. This is 4-step refutation, also a common thing. Also, I didn't come up with it. But you say, they say blank, I say blank. Here's my evidence. Therefore, don't vote for this. So I'm not that tells me where to write it. I'm not sure right now where to write this. Um, all in all, not terrible, but those are, as they say, the issues.
Cut them over. 1:30. All right. Is everyone ready? Cool. Let's begin.
What's the order, kid?
On our case, the Saudis will always prosecute the war if they think that they will be on the opposing end. And the reason why is because they are fighting the war to counteract the Iranian-backed Houthis. To the Saudis, Iran is an existential security threat that endangers the survival of their nation. It's kind of hard for us to appreciate this, so I'll give you a domestic example. Imagine if China or Russia funded guerrilla groups in Mexico. The U.S. would do anything in its power to get that foreign force off its border. When nations see hostile powers on their border, they do everything possible to make sure that
Frame it as a drop.
Which is why
Say
this is
they
fundamentally
dropped
what's
the
going on.
argument.
Saudi will always find loopholes around the arms sales, always ways to get out.
Extend
of
across.
That's why, according to Robert Pape at the University of Chicago, sanctions fail 95% of the time to change actors' incentives. Because security is always first.
The reason you want to do that is because once they drop the argument, the judge has to treat it as true. You're no longer need to provide warrants and say, imagine if Mexico did blah blah blah. Like, I said it, they dropped it. It's fact, right? Like, the judge's job is not to use their own reasoning to determine whether it's true. It's your opponent's job to do that work for the judge. When they don't do that work, the judge has to default to it being true. So when you frame something as a drop, it becomes a much clearer reason why this is true, and it also makes your opponent look a lot worse. They fundamentally mishandle this argument at the point where they drop the argument about Iran, blah, blah, blah. I won't go into the whole thing.
First, they say that they're a prerequisite. Our argument is actually a prerequisite because they're only removing one capability, one specific capability, which is the airstrike. But our argument is that the Saudis, as long as they have an intent to fight the war, will always find new ways to prosecute the war. That is not a prerequisite. We prerequisite their argument. Then they say that airstrikes are inherently worse. I'll explain why they're not, and other methods are actually much worse than airstrikes. Then they say, then they make this argument like Russia not wanting to sell because of like Iran, and it takes decades. Their decades evidence is only about planes, not about other things. A historical example comes from the national interest, who explains that before the Iran-Iraq war, the U.S. refused to sell ballistic missiles to the Saudis. The Saudis just turned to China, and the next couple months they got ballistic missiles from China. Doesn't take a long time. And they say that like because Russia's allied with Iran, they won't sell. This makes no sense. Countries fund both sides of conflict all the time. For example, the U.S. funds both Pakistan and India, diametrical allies. The reason why enemies. The reason why is because the U.S. wants to. Russia would want to make more money. Then they say that China does not want to anger the U.S., but China always wants to undermine the U.S. That's the whole point of their hegemonic strategy. They don't really care about making Trump more pissed off. He's kind of an angry guy anyway. Then they say that there's no U.S. credibility and that we have no threat of leverage. They miss our warrant. The Saudis never created our credibility. We have no credibility with them. The only thing that keeps the Saudis in check is our security guarantee. The reason why is because they view the security guarantee as the utmost important is because we secure them. They drop our brand evidence. Brand is really important. He finds that the reason why we're having a war in Yemen in the first place is because of the perception of a decrease in the U.S. security guarantee. The U.S. security guarantee of Saudi Arabia is the only thing making them feel safe enough to pursue negotiations. They say negotiations are imperfect. We agree they are imperfect, but they are also the longest-lasting negotiations we've ever had and are a better option than the pro. Then finally, now let's go to their case. So, start with our first contention on these signals. Someone points out we've cut off arms to lots of other countries like Thailand, like Turkey, like Egypt. None of them have stopped authoritarian regimes because authoritarian regimes don't respond. Finally,
Which contention are we on?
Our case about whether Saudis would not respond to sanctions. We also won the warrant about why none of these other nations would respond to sanctions. Sanctions don't work for any country. Now let's go to their contention on Yemen. So we've already established the Saudis will always fight. Here's the ways they will fight without using airstrikes. First, they'll just buy other weapons from China and Russia. They extend the example I gave of ballistic missiles. These are actually, if anything, as bad or worse than airstrikes because again, they have a high impact radius and are not accurate. That's why the card indicates that they would decimate entire cities. Two, they also have a massive stockpile of things like tanks and other weapons. They don't use most of the weapons the U.S. gives them. They stockpile them. That's why Knighton indicates that they could fight up for years. Third, even if they don't use those things, they'll predict ground troops. CNBC explains that they've already been wanting to use ground troops. The only reason they haven't used ground troops was because they felt enough confidence in U.S. airstrikes. Take away airstrikes, they are forced to send in their 105,000-man strong army. But fourth, they'll also use higher guns. The New York Times explains that the Saudis have a pretty terrible proclivity of using child soldiers from Darfur and from Sudan and just shipping them in. Okay, the point is that the Saudis
evidence with your debate
partner.
partner.
Comes from Wood, who finds that civilian targeting only goes up when you make nations fear for their own security. So, when you make nations go for their own security, they're going to say that airstrikes are inherently worse. But all the reasons I read can be applied to, all the reasons I applied can be applied to airstrikes. Ground troops can use slash and burn agricultural techniques to decimate infrastructure and can attack civilians. Mortars and missiles also take out infrastructure and also kill civilians. Their airstrike warrants are not worse than our warrants. We're just saying that our warrants get worse because the intent to target goes up. Then on some evidentiary basis. First, they say that one of the third targets civilians and 2 1/3 target schools. No, because 1 1/3 targets civilians and 1 1/3 goes to military targets. Our evidence indicates they would increase civilian targeting because they want to win the war. Okay. Then finally, on this idea of U.S. solving, this concedes that Saudi Arabia cares about the U.S., but the point is that they will never solve the conflict if the Saudis don't feel confident in the U.S. security guarantee. They will only increase their aggression and increase their targeting. Finally, they say the troops are not trained. This is exactly our point. The troops are not trained, which means they'll kill more civilians in the process. Thank you. Please begin.
This debate is a bit of a shit show to flow. Whoa, whoa, whoa. No one is going in order of the arguments, nor are they going in the order of the last person who spoke. It's like you have your evidence gathered in a random order, and you're just reading it in the order in your files. Sometimes I write sanctions, blah, 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 and then that's it for that sheet. And here I didn't even bother to just, try to connect any of the arguments to anything. I was just like, alright, I'm just going to write what he's writing from the top down. Who cares, right? I get the argument. I can keep track of it in my head. And no one's framing anything as an extension, right? So far, people have... This is something that's really frustrating about public forum. People will be completely unaware that their partner exists or said anything, right? You need to extend. My partner said this, extend across where this wasn't responded to. Instead, they're getting up and reading brand new cards their partner should have read in the first speech, such as this whole ground troops thing. Why wasn't this one of your arguments in the contention? And then also, if no one's doing extensions or pointing out drops, why am I flowing? I'll just listen to the last speech and pick the impact I like the most. I feel like I'm being mean. Is it because it's late, or is it because I don't like flowing and someone made me do it? All of these young people are so talented, and I envy their futures. No, they're great. I'm not trying to say they're not. I mean, they obviously made it to the final round of a big tournament, right? Great for them. Don't hate the sinner, they say. Hate the sin. And in this case, the sin is flowing in public forum.
Okay, so how often are they purchased?
Wait, do we?
Piles of spare parts.
Okay.
So that first question. You tell me Saudi Arabia has stockpiles of weapons. Do they have stockpiles of spare parts to repair their airplanes?
Yeah,
Say yes.
No one stockpiles just the bomb. They also stockpile the spare for the bomb.
Okay, so how often are they purchasing spare parts in order to keep their planes?
We're not talking about planes. We're talking about the other things.
Okay, so you would concede planes are grounded. Would you concede planes are grounded?
We're not making an argument about planes.
Okay, but I'm asking you, do you think that the planes will be grounded if you stop selling them?
Yeah, yes.
We agree. Planes will be grounded. But our argument is that they will use other tactics that are equally as devastating.
Or worse.
Yeah. Okay. So you say that, the U.S. allowed...
The entire negative case needs to be talking about why grounding planes is bad. What else are you saying on... What else could you possibly be saying on the negative? It would just be a no solvency argument if your entire argument was based on the idea that Russia and China will supply the exact same thing, right? That is entirely defensive. The only way you have offense in this round is if you're saying some difference between the Russia and Chinese weapons supplying dynamic is going to be measurably worse than the status quo. sounds like that's coming from grounding the planes and using worse alternatives. Like, why are you not saying that? Probably because you just write blocks and you don't know what your offense
Our
is.
human rights credibility.
Yeah.
Like, we allow Johnson to continue short. If the war gets worse, then our human rights credibility goes down even further, right? Because it looks like we're backing out of the conflict. And when we back out, the conflict gets worse.
I wouldn't say it that way. I think the narrative on human rights credibility is generally based on U.S. actions. So even if the war gets worse, I think most important to the narrative, and most important especially to the local people living in the areas, is that they see this war as a U.S.-backed war, and as a result, they're emboldened to. As a result, they get really angry. They don't like America, and we can never intervene.
So we can just wipe our hands clean. We're not dropping the bombs. That means we're absolved of all responsibility.
I don't think we're
Yes.
all responsibility. Obviously, I think the round will come down to minimize civilian casualties. So I guess like if we win our case,
Why
like, we win the human rights
are
credibility.
people in public, I say public forum, people in debate, right, are so scared to give a straight answer that disagrees with their opponent? They'll be like, so what you're saying is that once we're not giving them the bombs anymore, we'll just not be responsible for what they do to other people? Yes! That's the AF. Right? The AF is not Saudi Arabia will stop attacking Yemen. The AF is the United States will stop supplying the weapons with which Saudi Arabia is attacking Yemen. The very least you can have ready to go in your advocacy is this argument that, like, it's good if it's not the US's fault, right? And yeah, I think people should just be giving straight yes or no answers and making it up to their opponent to, I don't know. I think people are like really worried about what their opponents might say. Just say yes or no and let them say what they're going to say and then debate against it, because that's what this activity is.
I don't think you necessarily do if you win your case, but like, sure, it will come down to. I do think the round will come down to civilian casualties.
Okay, just clarify.
Okay. Can I ask you a question? So you say they could turn to ballistic missiles. How many ballistic missiles do they have?
In terms of the arsenal count,
Yeah, how much?
not entirely sure, but our argument is not that
50. How many airstrikes are they doing every day?
our argument is not that they have a stockpile of ballistic missiles so that they can buy them easily.
Okay, so how quickly can they buy them? Like, arm cells are not done overnight. And they need, like, to continually do them. They also have to buy the launchers, they have to buy the technology, they have to get, like, the scientific knowledge of how to launch them.
Dude, okay, great. Then all of these people in Yemen will die in a month. Like, what? The problem is when you don't know what your offense is, when you don't know what your win condition is, you become extremely defensive of everything in the debate. You're terrified to concede anything, right? But if you know what your offense is and what routes to victory that gives you, this negative team should just be like, okay, yeah. It takes a month. It takes a year. Like, they kill more people, though, and it ruins the peace agreements, which we say are going to happen in the status quo. You can go for the time frame argument at least people in Yemen have this week. They better spend that week packing and running, because once they get the missiles, pretty clear they're going to use them with less U.S. check back. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, you need to know what your win condition is so that you could just concede other things. At the end of this debate, these teams are going to have to convince their judges that one issue on their side is the most important thing in the round. And you can't do that if you're treating every little argument like it's indispensable. Like, you can't possibly concede this one thing on the flow. How am I going to then later believe something else makes this irrelevant? Or is everyone just going to go for everything the entire round? And I, as the judge, have to make my own decision on which arguments are the most important and why.
So how long?
First, our argument speaks to the fact that it is filled very quickly because
How
both sides. I don't know. Like
Why do you need it to be quickly?
But second, the more
Well,
important.
that answer is very important, because we're telling you that you can't just switch to ballistic missiles overnight. Our whole narrative
I'm not asking
See how much time they're wasting and how bad they're making themselves look? You don't need to win the argument that it's overnight.
One thing tomorrow, and and they're like, okay, we give up, we're done. No, we are, even if the Saudis back off, even if tomorrow the airstrikes stop, the next day or the next week, then the fighting.
But the problem comes to where
Now
you
you're
say
landing
if
on it,
the
but
moment
after
they
you
back
made
off,
all
like you
of
say,
this
we're gonna start
backpedaling
losing
and
the war,
unnecessary
devastating, which is
defense.
why they always engage. Our point is, the bond evidence says the moment that they see that in the immediate term they cannot win the war, they want to preserve their influence in the country. They always think it's better. They will think it's better to have a negotiated settlement that still preserves their interest in the short term, rather than risk in the long term losing all their interest if, as you say, they start winning.
Yeah, dude, I hope the guy that wrote that evidence is a psychic, because why are people not... I'm framing a lot of things and I'm yelling. You can also just be like, yeah, I think that evidence is wrong. Right? Like, who is this person? Why do they say that? What is the warrant? In other formats of debate, when they read this, you get to read the thing and be like, here is this person's reasoning. Here's this person's whatever, right? Or at least just leverage, yeah, well, we have evidence that says they won't, so I guess that's a wash. Like, challenge the claim.
The next day,
Right,
Saudis come back
I was
with
talking
back.
about the one. I was talking about the peace deal, not
Yeah, so the AF is making the argument that that Saudi Arabia is gonna think, here's the AF's story. Just to recap. Right now, Saudi Arabia is bombing a lot of Yemeni people and destroying their food. And so we get rid of their planes and their bombs. And it's going to take them a week to get new ones. And in that week, they're going to think, shit, we're going to have to wait a week. We may as well. For the record, I would say exactly what I'm saying right now in the round. I would say, here is the AF story. And make it sound exactly as ridiculous as I'm making it sound right now. So they say, yeah, no, I don't want to wait a week. let's just broker peace. The opposite of what we've wanted. And then you would think, okay, well, that's going to give an edge to the Houthi rebels, right? Because they're going to get what they want. Except, turns out, forget the people who've been bombed so far and the famine that's been created by destroying the food. Once you stop bombing the rebels that week, the whole rebellion is going to lose steam. And people are going to stop supporting the Houthis. And this whole conflict's going to be behind us. No mention of why there is a conflict, by the way. Seems like one side would mention why there is a conflict between the Houthis and the Saudis. Because the way I'm being told the story right now is the problem was Saudi Arabia, you see, they had too many bombs. And they're like, well, we have the bombs, we got to use them. And, you know, the Houthis, they get mad at that for 15, 20 minutes per bomb. And really, once you take the bombs away, the Saudis are going to be like, well, you know, I think I see things a little more clear-sightedly now. And I hope there's no hard feelings. And Yemeni people will go, oh, no hard feelings. Like, what, just those? No. That was... We only care what those people were saying when they were on fire. But it's been at least 7 days since then. So that's all behind us. What's the order?
If Saudi Arabia is always going to engage in Yemen, we should try to minimize the human cost of that engagement. But we would tell you that they're not always going to engage. First, we turn their argument. We tell you that Houthi influence only increases the more bombings that happen because they just scapegoat Saudi Arabia for all their problems. That's why their recruitment has been going up 100. They've gained 100,000 soldiers over the past couple months because of these bombings. But second, they concede that there there will no longer be planes if we affirm the resolution. That's really clear. So we have a 100% probability of a link. And remember that planes account for 2/3 of all civilian casualties. That goes away immediately. They care that ground troops can be just as bad. But remember, there are ground troops in Yemen right now under the UAE, and still most civilian casualties are due to airstrikes. Remember, 2/3 of infrastructure damage is also attributable to airstrikes. That's going to be increasing malnutrition by 50%. Then, what we would tell you is they tell Saudi Arabia has other ways to fight the war. 3 responses. First, they say ballistic missiles. They only have 50 of these missiles. They use 10 missiles every day right now. Then they tell you they have a large army they're going to send in. But the Business Insider evidence is really explicit here. They tell you this army is absolutely terrible. They're going to take more casualties than they were going to kill. The Houthis have been fighting civil wars for decades after decades. They're going to trounce the Saudi Arabian army. Then they tell you child soldiers are going to step in. Child soldiers aren't going to be effective enough. The UAE is already using them. It's not effective. Then the most important analysis here comes from Bazzi. He tells you that if MBS starts to fight a terribly losing war because airstrikes are the main way he's prosecuting the war in the status quo, he has no other option but to seek peace. If he continues to lose and lose, it's going to look worse and worse from an Iranian influence. It's only going to increase. Then they tell you that Russia's just going to step in. Remember that Russia is only selling defensive weapons to Saudi Arabia, not offensive weapons that can actually kill civilians. And we also tell you they're not going to.
What happened here?
And we also tell you they're not going to.
Oh, God. There's not one debate video that doesn't have a problem with it. Probably including this one. Who knows what's going on with my tech? For the record, my favorite part of that argument was that the Houthis are going to trounce the Saudis because they're decades of civil war experience. Okay. These 2 sheets of paper don't really matter right now. This sheet of paper is really the only one that matters. And you can see most of it's just gone to shit, right? People aren't extending things. People aren't responding. They're just getting up and they're reading their new cards or they're reading whatever they were going to say regardless of what's happened. So there's 2 key drops right now. There's a key drop by the affirmative, meaning it's the negatives argument that says the Saudi Arabian-U.S. alliance right now exists because of a fear of Iran, meaning that their motivation to, well, they haven't explained this, but the way I'm going to interpret it is that their motivation to have these arms and fight this war and distrust Yemen and all of that stuff comes from Iran's sphere of influence and wanting to combat that. Then there is the dropped argument, sort of quasi-dropped, they say, whatever. The extended argument from the affirmative that says that they're not going to have access to airstrikes post-plan, and that airstrikes is most of what they're using right now. Maybe it's because they have it, but somehow the argument is once they don't have airstrikes, they're not going to do anything, or we're going to have a week of them not doing anything, or whatever. So here we're going to see the final cross-X. Let's see. Is this...
The page stuff that Jenny read about this rebuttal, then the way that he read, there it is.
I can't tell if this is cross-X or... They're all standing.
Everyone ready? Remember that Saudi Arabia will always fight the war in Yemen because they view the Houthis and Iran as an Iran-backed proxy. Therefore, they have to keep fighting.
Well, if this is the last speech... oh no, I guess it's the next speech. I think it's the... This is the third speech for the affirmative. Okay, got it.
Because if they do not, Iran is on their border, and that is a core national security threat. Our paper evidence indicates that...
For the record, saying, remember that blah, 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 like, that doesn't tell me to do anything with my flow, right? In flow-heavy formats of debate, literally every sentence you say should be framed in a way to get the judge to look at something on the flow in a specific place or write something on the flow in a specific place, right? But...
Sanctions fail 95% of the time because it is poor interest. They will always find ways to fight the war otherwise. Let's look at their responses. They say first that if there's increased bombings, the Houthis get angry. If we win our turns and Saudi Arabia is more aggressive, that means the Houthis will also be more aggressive. Then they say that no planes will 100% link the they say probability. Look, probability isn't real weighing. If we win our links, that means that we win probability as well. Also, we would say that our paper evidence, 95%, that's pretty probable. With that, let's look to their case and some of the other options that we can have. First, we say that we can use ground military forces that are 115,000 people strong. Their response is that these ground forces are bad and untrained. That is precisely our point. They will go in and they will kill more civilians. Then, on ballistic missiles, they say we only have 50. Our evidence indicates that we can start getting more of them. Even if they have 50 now, we'll just order a lot more. Look, in the short term, we can just shift to ground troops, which they're ready to propose. All of their arguments are incredibly short term. Maybe in the short term, they can't use all their capabilities. They can definitely use ground troops. And remember, ground troops are just as damning because they can do things like slashing.
So, for the record, the only 50 argument was in cross-X, not in... I mean, maybe he said it in his speech. I don't know. But, so I just wrote it in. But maybe he got into that later, right? But cross-X isn't the flow. If you said it in cross-X, that's not the same as you saying it on my flow. And I don't vote on it if you only said it in cross-X.
And destroy infrastructure. Remember, what is really important is that for our wood evidence indicates that in the long term, the Saudis will kill more civilians. And the reason is that when the balance of power shifts away from them, that means that they have to be more aggressive and kill more civilians in order to make them capitulate quickly. Finally, they say that the U.S. is what makes Saudi Arabia less aggressive. They drop our uniqueness. The U.S. security guarantee is the reason why Saudi Arabia is being less aggressive right now. However, if you take away the U.S. security guarantee, they have to fend for themselves and become more aggressive. Second, MBS will also become more aggressive because what Pape explains is that sanctions may be the effects of rallying around the flag, therefore they're more aggressive. Finally, on their case, they say quickly that it's only defensive weapons, they'll shift to offensive weapons like China and Russia have done that in the past. Second, they say that no security guarantee will be there no matter what. Remember, it's a perception argument. If you undermine the security guarantee, there's no protection. That's why we gave. Thanks.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, on my mind, it's clearly in favor of the negative right now. Just going off of, like, well, what's conceded, right? Like, here's the thing. If in a debate, if anything has text next to it, I don't want to read it, right? When I'm making my decision, I don't want to be the arbiter deciding, does China blah, 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 or does China not blah, blah, blah? And if I do, I'm certainly going to ask to look at your evidence, which I guess I'm not allowed to do in public forum. I don't know. So what I want is to make a really easy decision. How do people make easy decisions in debate? Well, with drops. If something is dropped, I know it's true. If it's important enough to be, if it's the most important thing in the round, it's true and the most important thing, debate over, right? So what I'm going to look at is what are the two main dropped issues? What do I have to believe on each side? And is either of those things important enough to me that as the judge I feel like if I say that's why you won or that's why you lost, no one's going to chew me out? Which is basically what every judge just wants to avoid. They just want to make a decision that seems like the decision that is the decision they want to make or seems like the decision they're supposed to make, and to just get out of it without anybody giving them a hard time. So one of them is the argument for the negative that gentleman who just spoke correctly identified as being dropped, uniqueness, which explains supposed to be why the status quo is good. It's not great evidence for why the status quo is good, but it at least demonstrates a lack of propensity for the affirmative to solve. Now, you're not framing it that way, right? You're not saying the word solvency, but whatever. Meaning that as long as Iran and the Houthi are in the area, they create an incentive in and of themselves for Saudi Arabia to be aggressive in the region. Meaning that they'll just get weapons somewhere else. Like, of course, the only weapons they're getting from Russia and China are defensive right now. It's because they're getting their offensive weapons from us. Then the other argument I have on the other side is this argument about the Russia-China... Not the Russia-China. The Russia-China can't do airstrikes, and that you can't replace whatever, the parts or something like that. At best, this is a time frame argument, and what I need from the affirmative in order for them to win based on that time frame argument, which in theory they could bring up in the next speech, because there's no reason for them to not see that this was going to be a problem with their case. What I need to hear from them is why that time frame matters. Now, their argument so far for why that time frame matters is that that time frame brokers peace. That is enough time for the Houthi people to chill out and for the Saudi Arabians to not feel like waiting to kill them, that will broker peace. But it just happens to be that the thing that they dropped on the neg counteracts that story. So I think barring any team pulling a miracle out of their ass or just really dropping the ball, it's going to be I don't know how many judges are on the panel, but it seems like a pretty straightforward vote for the negative. But let's hear this last cross-ex. I am so stuffed up.
Are you ready to draw? Ready. Okay. So my first question would be, let's say MBS is considering stopping once you no longer have restrictions. He's thinking, I can send in my army, they're pretty poorly trained, all the generals are like my cousins, and they're going to lose pretty badly, and that might make me look bad. How does that produce like a rallying around the flag effect? Like let's say he sends in the troops and then they just get swamped.
This is where the rallying around the flag effect comes from. Rallying around the flag effect comes from the sanctions, which are put in place first. Then, once the rally around the flag effect is put in place, he has to do anything that he can to win the war. Because this is the comparative. Yes, the armies are untrained and they are not ideal. But the comparative is that if they don't fight, the Houthi-backed Iranians are on their border.
Okay. Quickly. All right, you just spoke for a little bit. I would like a quick word. So, what I would argue here is that like, it's not about whether or not the ground troops are more poorly trained or kill more. It's about whether the Saudi Arabians actually want to send them in. And if they're poorly trained, the Saudi Arabians think, wow, if we send in our army, they're going to be decimated. Then they don't send them in, and your impact's going to
Why would they be decimated? Are the Houthis trained by anything other than their own civil war for decades? Like, Saudi Arabia, not on the level of the US or Russia or China's military, but I would imagine they have a stronger military force that is better trained than a collection of rebels, which is hopefully what the negative's going to say. But I think regardless, they've done a good enough story to say what the motivation for them to go in is, even if they're not going to succeed, right? They have to say, like, they'll kill people. That's bad. Like, doesn't mean if they're going to end up looking good or succeeding in their motivation. Like, they have to do that because of the circumstances, blah, blah, blah. You already heard it.
Our evidence speaks to the fact that they were ready to send them in, but the fact that they could use U.S. airstrikes to convince them they didn't have to. So that takes out your evidence.
Like, our evidence is the exact opposite. So we'll go back and forth.
Keep saying that.
Yeah, you can ask
This is
your
just
question.
like, look, this is the simple calculus that MBS is going to make. They have, like, remember, even though they're poorly trained, it's still 115,000 people.
Also, why is the affirmative saying we'll go back and forth? You have the burden of proof. You probably don't want to say that the most important claims in the debate are a wash.
He may win the war, he may not. But if he does not fight the war, he has no chance of winning anything. The Houthis are guaranteed to infringe on them.
Okay, so right now their ground troops are not in use.
Yeah, there are some, but there's a lot more. Like, you drop our warrants.
Okay, sure, you can ask the question.
Yes, thank you for framing that as dropped, right? You should have done that with a lot of things so far in the cross-ex, right? Like, you can't save it. You dropped it. We're not gonna have this discussion now.
So, in your summary, you speak about like the security idea. So
Yeah.
what is the U.S.'s and Saudi's relationship built on? What are the cores?
We have military bases in Saudi Arabia. We buy a lot of
Why?
oil. We're investing in their country.
Yeah,
right
so
now.
basically we're both sides to Iran. It's guns for oil, right? That's the nature.
We don't get that much oil from Saudi Arabia.
We think that it's about economic interests. We also think it's about
Okay, well,
the fact
oil
that
is
they're
economic.
very opposed to Iran. And we think specifically there are other reasons why it's
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't want to get lost in the weeds. I'm trying to establish that it is largely about U.S. sending military support.
No, like
We
that's,
disagree with it.
that's not what it's about.
Wait. So you're telling me that the U.S. Saudi Arabia alliance
You're straw manning what we're saying here. All we're telling
So
you
then
is that
say it.
security guarantee, like the definition of a security guarantee, is if I'm a country, I'm invaded, another country will step in on my behalf.
With
Right?
what? Their
Being
military?
on the border doesn't mean like Iran is, coming into Saudi Arabia trying to take over Riyadh. That's the security guarantee. So you're conflating the two.
No, we're not. Arms sales are the way that the U.S. guarantees security. For example, when Russia invaded Crimea, we didn't send them offensive weapons to Ukraine because we didn't want to be perceived as having to back up Ukraine in the event of any.
Is the app's argument that just because we stop sending them weapons, the security guarantee is in place? That's fine, but... So, like, they're gonna be like, we're not mad at these people that stopped sending us weapons. I don't buy that.
It's also not that in practice the Iranians are on our border, but it's MBS's perception that, because that's what the computer backs by. So we all
Okay.
Okay.
That's a government response.
I don't really flow rebuttals. I just write it on a separate sheet of paper, and I just write each voter or each reason they say they should win, and whether or not I believe you.
You're always going to be affirmed. We tell you as they admit, these claims are grounded on day one, and we tell you that this is going to be uniquely the most important way for you to vote in this round. Because we tell you that airstrikes currently are causing 2/3 of the casualties and 2/3 of the infrastructure damage, despite the fact that there are hundreds of thousands of UAE troops and hundreds of thousands of Houthi fighters. The reason for this comes from our way in which that it is uniquely bad to be able to go beyond enemy lines, provide cluster bombs in every 1 mile square radius, and that is why they are driving civilian casualties. Specifically, Elias tells you that the airstrikes have spiked malnutrition by 15%, and that because they are simply able to target food infrastructure and reduce the food supply by 15%. We tell you in our world at least, we can start rebuilding that food supply and pushing people away from famine, because right now 14 million people are food insecure. But then they tell you that there are ways that the war will get worse. They first tell you it'll be missiles, but as they admit, it's taking a long time to put together missiles, because right now they only have 50 of them. And they also drop from rebuttal when I told you from why it'll be economically not feasible for them to switch. But then second of all, they tell you they're going to send in their army. But the business insider specifically tells you that their army is so bad they will not send it in, because they will getting bad perception of them, because they will be losing more than they are gaining. And MBS does not want to make this war even more, and not want to lose this war even more than they otherwise would be. And then, we also tell you from Bazi that at the end of the day, at the point that we have proven to you that their other options are not feasible, and that they cannot work in the short term, and that they are unlikely to win the war, we tell you that they have no other option but to seek peace. As in the short term, they will lose all influence in the country if they fully pull out. With a peace deal, there is some chance that they will maintain that influence. And remember, we tell you that Russia is also unlikely to step in, and they won't want both sides offensively, and weaken both allies, and because they have economic interest in keeping them secure. We also tell you that their security guarantee is not be eliminated overnight, and they're still anti-Iran. We also tell you that at the end of the day, the Houthis only gain power in their world, and we tell you to increase their recruitment as we bound them more. But we get the Houthis to the negotiating table of the world in a world in which they lose their legitimacy. At the end of the day, we tell you vote on the probable impact. You have airstrikes. You have what drives civilian casualties, and the possibility of peace. Thus, you affirm.
You went for way too many things. You're not collapsing. Pick one of those issues. You only have 2 minutes. In 5-minute PMRs in Parley, you would talk about one thing, right? You're splitting 2 minutes between 6 voting issues? Or 7, I think? You need to pick one thing, prove you win it, prove it's important enough to win you the whole round. Also, start with what you're winning, right? Start with your most important thing. So, like, you'll see... Let me go over here now. Here is a sheet of paper that I just made. So they're like, airstrike, two-thirds of damage. I don't care. That just doesn't affect my vote. That may be true, that may not be true in a world where they can get some other weapons eventually. That just doesn't make a difference, especially when you're not reading any argument specific to time frame, right? You didn't even read the argument that the time frame they have. Well, you kind of do, but you didn't specify that, like, not having these airstrikes is specifically what makes them blah, blah, blah. At least not when you talk about this, right? Like, when you're going for this, you explain the whole story, but instead now you're talking about, like, cluster bombs are bad. Like, sure, doesn't make a difference in my vote. You say the food supply will be rebuilt. I just don't believe you, right? I have reason to believe that Saudi Arabia is going to keep attacking people because you don't address their motivations to do it. You just address the means, and the means being disrupted is temporary. You say Saudi Arabia is not going to send them their army. I don't believe you. Like, I have strong reasons for why they would. Your source says that their army is so bad that they would not send them in to fight rebels. One, I don't believe you. Two, the neg has arguments against this. So best is a wash where I would defer neg anyway, but I also just prefer the neg's evidence on this because it makes sense. When they can't win, they will seek peace. That's what this says. I just don't believe... So what did I write? I don't buy that having to wait a week gives them the perception that they can't win. Which is hopefully something that the negative says. And then you said something Houthi related, and then something. I didn't flow it. And if it was the most important thing, you should have said it first. All right. Let's see what the app has got.
Okay. Is everyone ready? The most important thing to recognize is the Saudis will always prosecute the war if they think they are on the losing end, because they know that if they give up the war, they get an Iranian-backed state on their border. They cannot tolerate this. We've already established that they do not tolerate hostile foreign powers on their border. With my U.S.-Mexico example, that is why Ronald Kate finds that 95% of the time sanctions fail. They drop this analysis and should lose the debate for them right here. Because as long as we prove that the Saudis have some way out, they will always take it because they cannot tolerate losing the war. Here's how they do that with their methods. So the most important piece of analysis that they drop is the Wood analogy. Wood says that what's more important than the actual methods is the strategy. The strategy shifts from somewhat precise bombings to actually targeting civilians all the time to beat down the enemy's will and to make sure that they win. And the two ways that they do that are one from ballistics. We say they'll apply ballistics from things like China and Russia, and they say it'll take a long time, but we say that the history disproves this. That before the Iran-Iraq War, China stole them to Saudi Arabia, and this almost immediately, at best, that means it's a short-term argument for them. In the long term, ballistics still happen. And they say airstrikes are worse, but airstrikes are not uniquely worse than ballistics. They have the same effect as dropping a bomb or missile on someone, and the ballistics...
Oh, it just ends. Well, so far, this is what I had. God, if this video does not work, I'm gonna end it all. Okay, I'm not actually gonna do that. Don't call anyone. Great. They'll fight because of Iran. I buy this. Wow, there's crazy lag looking at this screen right now, so hopefully the sound and everything isn't fucked. They'll take any option to win. I buy this. Post-AF options are worse than kill more civilians. I buy this. That's enough reason for me to vote for the negative. Who I hope won in a unanimous decision, but let's find out. Does this say? Yeah, 7-0. Yeah, dude. Who was on the neg? I mean, I certainly hope it's the negative. Yeah, I mean, there doesn't really seem to be any question here. They say their names. God, I want to know so bad. There's no way that the AF won 7-0. You know what? I'm going to save myself some time. If you're watching this and you know the answer to this question, why don't you go ahead and let me know in the comments. If there's other things you want to see, let me know in the comments. So, I don't know. Hopefully this was useful. You get to see, like, how a crotchety, jaded, tired judges a debate round. Which is not unusual, right? I think it's unusual to get a judge who is flowing like someone's watching and is making their decision like they're having a great time. Like, at this time, it's final round. I'm sure it's like late at night. Everybody wants to go home. And a lot of these judges are probably thinking similar things in their heads, or I'm a bad person. I don't know. But, yeah. Bye.